Hi everyone, Boris Johnson. Why? Here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Harry Styles album, Fine Line. This is a new full-length album from singer, songwriter, One Direction member, Mr. Harry Styles, following up his 2017 debut, and I will say, despite not being crazy about that record, so far as One Direction members going solo are concerned, Harry has shown the most potential. As Zayn and Liam, as well as Niall, have all put out their own solo works, I haven't got the same sense that they have artistic abilities and tastes that extend as far as Harry's.
Don't you forget about my boy Lewis, though. He's gonna put out the best album next year. 10 out of 10, 20 out of 20. Lewis.
Well, while Harry has put out the best solo work so far, I still think there is a lot of room to grow artistically, as well as just defining Harry's musical style and voice. But honestly, with Fine Line, I feel like we are not really any closer to that. As yet again, Harry serves up another batch of inconsistent tracks, even nondescript songs that hop around from Blue-Eyed Soul to sad boy folk, some 70s rock, some contemporary pop too. There is a bit of a vintage flair that runs throughout much of the record, but I wouldn't say Harry even leans on that heavily enough for it to be a central idea or concept of the album. Essentially, we've gone from One Direction to pretty much no direction. The indecisiveness of this record begins right away with the opening track, which features some subtly swaggered vocals, some driving drums and bass. It sounds like something off of a Strokes record, but then it's lightly enhanced with these bright shots of vocal harmonies, these dee-dee-dee-dee-dees. It sounds like something out of a Grizzly Bear song or a slick piece of pop or soft rock out of the 70s, maybe even a little Eagles-ish. The song at the core of it all is absolutely boring, although it's hard to tell because Harry does so little to sell the damn thing vocally. The mix totally sucks too. The drums sound like they're behind a wall, the group vocals overpower everything else. Harry has such little vocal presence on the track, the acoustic guitar that's in there very quietly is so faint it might as well just not even be there. I was pretty bored by Watermelon Sugar as a single, and I can't say I'm much more into it now that I'm hearing it on the album. It feels like another groovy pop throwback, but yet again, Harry doesn't really sell the track vocally. And this is the type of instrumental a top-notch soul singer or even Freddie Mercury would have murdered back in the day. But Harry's performance here is just middle of the road, not interesting at all. I can't say the lyrics are all that profound either, as Harry is mostly singing about comparing love or intimacy to the euphoria of the sweetness of fruit. Whoa, comparing like love and sex to fruit, that's never happened before. The song Adore You next is a step toward the nondescript. I can't say I get the appeal of the song as a single. Does it not just sound like a Maroon 5 song? I mean, sure, maybe Maroon 5 would not be the first band to employ the synth bass that this track has, but the drums, the groove, the singing, the overly slick production, it all just sounds something like Adam Levine and the gang would do. But with a few more 80s nods, it's very so what. I liked the song Lights Up as a single, with its very moody take on Blue-Eyed Soul with its bright shots of group vocals. But the more I listen to it, the more I feel like the structure of this track is kind of malformed. The verses don't pop as much as they could, the choruses don't pop as much as they could, all because the progression of the track just feels a bit muddy. Also, if you stripped the song back of all of these showy vintage bits of instrumentation, I can't help but feel like the song itself would be incredibly boring. But not nearly as boring as the song Cherry, which actually is pretty stripped back and acoustic, and it may just be candidate for worst song on the record. For one, it is way too early in the track list to start putting out songs like this quiet finger-picked acoustic ballad with vocals that are so subdued they sound nearly comatose. Not to mention that for whatever reason, the vocals on this track sound way more anonymous than any other vocal on the rest of the record. I could not pick this out as Harry Styles to save my life. On top of it, the whole thing sounds like Peter Gabriel's Salisbury Hill, but on Xanax and completely stripped of any likable qualities. Thankfully, there are some highlights that come around the halfway point though, like the song Falling. It's a somber piano tune where the vocals are actually legitimately impressive, especially when Harry hits that one very loud and very high note in the second half of the track. The singing is great and shines despite how basic and plain the piano instrumental is. Certainly a powerful and emotional moment on the record, even if the lyrics aren't the deepest in the world. To Be So Lonely, though, isn't nearly as gratifying, mostly because I feel like the song doesn't really live up to the title or the sentiment of the track. With its flirty acoustics and island-inspired groove, the whole thing sounds like sociably dancing the night away with a bunch of drunk boomers on a beach resort. If this thing is lonely, it's Jimmy Buffett or Vampire Weekend lonely. It's not Conor Oberst or Elliott Smith lonely. The song She, though, is a transition into a fusion of very dramatic 70s rock and soul, with these extended, kind of demented, buzzing, screaming guitar solo passages at the finish that sound like something Jack White would just freak out over. But the whole thing sounds like a kind of gentrified version of a sad, sad soul anthem out of the 60s or the 70s. Think something like James Brown, It's a Man's World. Still, the track hits hard, a lot harder than most of the songs here, even if most of the appeal, I think, comes down to the instrumental. Also, the bright vocal shots of She. The unexpected stylistic twists and turns continue onto the track Sunflower Volume 6, which sounds like what you would get if you forced Of Montreal and Vampire Weekend to write a bit of a reggae-inspired hit that was meant to rule the radio waves in the 2000s. Because of the unlikely mix of sounds and hooky melodies, it's certainly one of the better tracks here. The record does not pick up from here, though, unfortunately. The vintage folk pop ripoff, Canyon Moon, just sounds like a bad bit of Paul Simon runoff. Also, the grating and silly group vocals on Treat People with Kindness, which come off as very unself-aware, yeah, they're tough to stomach. The closing track on this thing, the title track, sounds like a bad read on some falsetto vocals and acoustic chords from a Bon Iver record, and then a big Sufjan Stevens-sized instrumental finish. Most likely there are two dudes right now in a college dorm somewhere having this conversation.
Whoa, man, it would be so epic if Bon Iver and Sufjan collabed.
Well, this is certainly what it would sound like if it were bad, with Harry's very weak falsettos, way too much reverb, a boring set of chords. This song goes absolutely nowhere fast, and then the big instrumental finish basically feels like not just putting lipstick on a pig, but also a pair of Chanel pumps and a $1,000 dress. Overall, I'm not very crazy about this record. It does have some highlights, but for every highlight there is also a pretty crummy track too. A majority of the other songs are just merely tolerable. I'm pretty indifferent to the whole thing, although I can't say I will go into another Harry Styles album after this with nearly as much hope. I'm feeling a light to decent 5 on this one. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Harry Styles, forever.